and I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement at the Center for the Performing Arts. Now, tonight we are thrilled that we have folks joining us from 30 different states and 6 different countries, including Angola, Germany, Japan, Poland, the United Kingdom, and Australia. And I'm going to venture to guess that some of you have not had a chance to visit us in person. So I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about the center. We're located just north of Indianapolis, Indiana, in the beautiful city of Carmel. Our campus consists of 3 different venues. The beautiful Palladium, our 1,600-seat concert hall. And then across the green space, we have another building that houses the Tarkington, our 500-seat proscenium arch theater, and then our wonderful little black box theater called the Studio. In addition to our 6 resident companies, we present artists from all over the world in multiple genres. We hope you get a chance to join us sometime soon in person. Now tonight, I know you are all as excited as I am about our special guest. And I know you're going to have many questions, and that's wonderful. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to hold those questions to the end, but you don't have to wait to the end to post those. If you're joining us on Zoom, go ahead and practice. Put your cursor over the bottom of your screen right now, and you'll see a little Q&A function. If you don't mind, go ahead and post your questions using the Q&A instead of the chat. It just makes it a little easier for us to keep track of all those questions. If you're joining us on Facebook, please post those questions in the comments, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. Now, I'd like to tell you about our special guests tonight. Our host is Todd Williams, a sought-after saxophonist, clarinetist, flautist, and clinician. He is known for his work with the Wynton Marsalis Quintet, Septet, and Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. Todd is an assistant professor of music education at Indiana Wesleyan University, where he directs the jazz ensemble and jazz combo. And he recently earned his doctorate in music and education from the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music. A former director of Times Square Church in New York, he has penned a variety of contemporary gospel choral works, including the international favorite, We Proclaim Him. Todd has toured the world, playing venues from the White House to Carnegie Hall to the Hollywood Bowl, and has appeared with such artists as Harry Connick Jr., John Hendricks, Terrell Stafford, Marcus Roberts, Slide Hampton, Christian McBride, and Wynton Marsalis. Todd is a 4-time recipient of ASCAP's Plus Award for Composers. Our other guest is the one and only Wynton Marsalis. He's an internationally acclaimed musician, composer and band leader, educator, and advocate of American culture. As a composer, his body of work includes over 600 original songs, 11 ballets, 4 symphonies, 8 suites, 2 chamber pieces, 1 string quartet, 2 masses, 1 violin concerto, and in 2021, a tuba concerto. At 19, Wynton hit the road with his own band and has been touring the world ever since. He is the winner of 9 Grammy Awards and the only musician to win two Grammys, one for jazz, one for classical, in the same year. His oratorio, Blood on the Fields, was the first jazz composition to win the Pulitzer Prize for Music in 1997. Wynton has delivered his message of accessible music education to learners around the world through his books, children's albums, lectures, educational concerts, and master classes, which he has put on across the globe. He currently serves as the managing and artistic director for Jazz at Lincoln Center and the director of jazz studies at the Juilliard School. And we are thrilled to be welcoming him back to the Palladium for a full concert with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra on February 27th. Todd and Wynton, please join me. We are so excited to have you with us tonight.
All right.
Welcome. I'm going to turn off my camera so I can hear all the words of wisdom.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that beautiful intro.
Yeah, that was quite flattering.
Now
Hey,
read
man.
the other, get to the other part. All
That's
right.
right. Hey, man, so it's good to see you.
Yeah,
Thank
so,
you for being a part of this program. I really appreciate it. You taking your time to, come out and give a shout out to the Palladium and folks here. Obviously, it's they have a fantastic staff there. One of the greatest venues in our country. I mean, they have a fantastic thing going on there. And they'll sell a lot of tickets too, so you'll be comforted in that.
well, let's see, Dr. Williams. It's good to talk to you. I love the Palladium, so I'm happy. I'm happy to be here, talk with you and with y'all.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Well, I guess we should start at the beginning. I know you're always shedding on something, okay? And so for our listening audience, shedding is the practice and the art of, well, just practicing, working on stuff, and whether it's reading or studying or delving into, I don't know, some new thing or whatever. So what are you shedding on now, man? I know you're always shedding on something.
Well, I just wrote a fanfare, and I was working on just my French horn writing. I just got an excerpt last night from Matthew Van Beesen, a great French hornist who's playing in New Orleans and now runs the UMS at the University of Michigan, about Brahms' Third. We're talking about the horn parts. So,
oh yeah.
And I'm trying to play out songs like we play Brilliant Corners, interesting progression. Yeah. Monk wrote 7-bar phrases, and Chick Corea song, Tones for Jones Bones. Interesting way he uses the modulations and the harmony, and just always trying to play better, be better, more connected, play better in time, with more logic. Solo stuff we all used to work on and talk about years ago. Todd, I'm still working on that same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, that's a horn. Did you say concerto? What kind of pieces? The horn?
Well, no, I wrote a tuba concerto, and then I wrote a bassoon quartet. So I was in the bass clef for a long time this summer.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay.
And it was for a lady, Carol Jansch, in the Philadelphia Orchestra, unbelievable tubist.
Oh, okay.
And the fanfare was for a big brass section and four percussionists, but the 6 horns. Trumpet players were always trying to figure out, how do we feel about French horns? I mean, are they in the brass section or are they woodwinds? If they're woodwinds, then we don't, we don't know how we feel about it. When they're in the brass, we're happy to see them.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just thinking about all those, and always I'm thinking about fundamental things at all times. Just always trying to listen. I'm listening to what a lot of younger musicians are playing, listening to their records and seeing what they're doing and thinking about. And that goes on. Emmanuel Wilkins, a young saxophonist, just put out an album. I've been listening to him. I was listening to avant-garde drummer Milford Graves.
Okay, yeah.
I just try to listen to different people and what they're doing.
Yeah, staying fresh. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about New Orleans for a minute. So most people know that New Orleans has a lot of different venues, and that the music kind of came out as sort of an artifact of what was happening throughout history, and we know that there were whole families who were known for their music, the Batistes, and DuPont, like all sorts of families came out and were excellent, and were known for their music. My question though is, what are some factors about New Orleans as a city, or New Orleans, as we say?
Right. Well, I think that
make it an ideal place to learn is what I'm saying. What makes it an ideal place to learn?
I think that in the past, there were a lot of traditions that came together in one place. First, the bass line was French. So the French loved music. They had a band system. Right. Then the Spanish had 50 years between 1750 and 1800, roughly, where the French lost to the Spanish. The Spanish took over New Orleans, and the Spanish brought a certain type of organization. Actually, the French quarters in New Orleans were built by the Spanish. Then under French domain, New Orleans was Catholic, but it also was not like Protestant under English domain of the rest of America. So slaves could play drums, they could sell goods, they could petition for their freedom. Even under the Spanish, they could petition for their freedom. They didn't get it most of the time, but they could also press a grievance against a master. They didn't win most of the time, but they could do it. It was a possibility. that gave the city a certain wildness.
Okay.
Then after the Haitian Revolution, nobody wanted people from Haiti, but New Orleans, because the Haitians, all of their wealth was in slaves. So they didn't want those Haitian slaves in America because they were known to be wild and wanting to be free. Right. New Orleans, however, had a lot of French people, and they, after the Louisiana Purchase in 1804, 1803, 1804, Thomas Jefferson, Napoleon sold New Orleans to America. The Americans started to increase their numbers, and the French population of New Orleans would do anything to have more French. So they accepted the Haitians. So there was another kind of wilder population that came to New Orleans, and that's why you see a lot of the early legislation, Plessy versus Ferguson, and these things come out of New Orleans, early civil rights legislation in the 19th century. So I'm giving you a long answer.
No,
but
that's good.
The band tradition was there in Butler. The Americans tried to figure out how to destroy Congo Square, which was where the Africans would play their slaves on the summer. And eventually they figured out how to kill it by the 1850s. They did everything, redistrict, ran military through there, put shrubberies in it, did everything they could to make it so they could not do it. But it was too late, because then the seed of like the drumming and the things that could come and could kind of congeal into an American style already existed. New Orleans was one of the first cities to fall in the Civil War. We fell very early, and the general who was sent was General Butler. He sent for Patrick Gilmore's band, because Patrick Gilmore brought an integrated band which drove New Orleans citizens crazy. But Patrick Gilmore was like the cornet king before Herbert L. Clark, whose method books we all learned how to play in my generation.
Clark trumpet stage.
And Patrick Gilmore was a cornetist, and he had huge bands. He came to New Orleans, and they had dances and socials. They were integrated, drove people crazy. And from that, they became more musicians. A lot of the Civil War instruments were left in the New Orleans and the plantation area around there. It's a tradition. People, so you get the sense of all these things coming together.
Right.
Then the Mexican Expo, Cotton Expo, a band came up from Mexico. This was in the 1880s. And they were a craze of New Orleans. They were bringing different grooves, and a couple of the early jazz musicians came from the Mexican tradition. And then after when the North gave the South back over to Confederates, that was the end of Reconstruction. And New Orleans became even more combative about freedom. Right. And out of that spirit came jazz. And that first generation of jazz musicians with Buddy Bolden in the 1890s, they had come from the American band tradition, the tradition of playing Caribbean grooves and things south of the border that was a part of being New Orleans. That would be represented by a trumpet player like Manuel Perez, was one of the early ones. And the blues that came from Mississippi, that would be Bunk Johnson and Buddy Bolden. The church tradition, all these things came together. And then under the, because tiers of, it wasn't just black and white, there were tiers. There was a middle Creole caste in New Orleans, white Creoles, which was kind of light-skinned blacks and dark-skinned blacks. It created a stew that allowed for everybody to integrate in an unwilling way. They all hated each other. But they did it. but they were around each other. And then there was a race riot in 1900 because a guy named Robert Charles shot some policemen who humiliated him in front of his nephew or something like that. And those riots forced Creole musicians to have to vie for work with black musicians. And that's when that integration really created jazz, because before, kind of light-skinned group of musicians who could kind of just read music and look down at the black musicians, they were forced to compete for those jobs. And that combination created jazz. And there were always white musicians. Papa Jack Lane was a band who always were trying to figure out different things that were going in the music, but could not be integrated. But they were, and these things, it's hard for me to give you a total history, but John Philip Sousa was playing ragtime. All of these things were existing. And then there was a tradition of teaching and excellence, which it took until the 1970s and 80s to really erode. Right. And now at this point, it's basically non-existent.
I hear you. Yeah. So, so I was thinking about the concept of proximity. So I was thinking about, you know how like it is in New York, like all the years you've been in New York, you know how you get on the train, it's crowded,
Right.
there's one seat, and there might be somebody that you don't want to really sit next to because maybe they don't have the right odor or whatever. But if you've been walking all day through Manhattan, you're like, I'm gonna get that
Right.
seat.
Right. Right.
You know, but all the people there in New Orleans, so a lot of people live, they cohabitate. I mean, they live, you know, you can
Yeah,
have integrated neighborhoods, right?
yeah, you
Maybe
did at
talk
that
about that a
time.
little bit. Okay, yeah.
The neighborhoods were probably more integrated then than they are now.
Wow.
People didn't
That's
have
amazing.
money. Even on Buddy Bolden's block, there were Italian people, and
Yeah.
there was a lot more integration at that time. Now, with the cell phones and the stuff that we have, you can sit on a train next to people in their own worlds. Like they're not. Now I see people more segregated by age
Yeah.
than I see
Yeah.
it. But I mean, of course, there's a typical segregation we have, but the age segregation in our country has really, really, I think, grown exponentially. I guess inside of families, you kind of forced to be with people who are not your age. But what
Right.
I see in public spaces is very much people of the same age. Unless
Yeah.
sometimes in New York, I see people who work together and the managers may be a little older, but in general, people are around the same age group.
Right. All right. Well, I got a question for you that I think a lot of our listeners might enjoy hearing about. So, most of our listeners know that you played classical. You may still play classical. I don't know. Classical and jazz and
Not playing that much.
so you were killing it though, you know. So everybody knows that you've played jazz and classical very, very well. What they may not know is the generation of musicians that influenced like the way you write music, specifically the music of your father and James Black.
Oh yeah,
So,
man.
so could you maybe for the people talk about James Black and that scene with your dad and like what did that look like? You know, like
Well, they were working gigs and it was depressed, so there weren't a lot of people there. They were mainly
okay,
playing in clubs with 6 people, 7 for years. I grew up with James Black like he was my uncle.
okay,
And there was also a lot of they had a lot of aspirations for the country to go with the civil rights movement. And as the 70s came in, I remember them when I first was conscious in the 60s, and John Coltrane and the type of musicians they admired was still alive. They used to always tell a story about John Coltrane coming to see them play. And the
wow,
train was interested in the songs James Black was writing in 5, like the
wow.
Magnolia Triangle. Boo-doo-dip, boo-dee-da-lee, boo-dee, boo-doo-doo, doo-dee-da-loo, dee, boo-dee-da-lee, boo-dee, boo-doo-doo, doo-dee-doo, doo-dip, boo-dee-da-lee, boo-doo-doo, doo-dee-doo. Shoo doo be dee be doo boo dee be doo doo beep beep boo dee oh boo boo beep be doo be dee be beep boo beep boo dee oh boo 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 beep be doo boo dee be dee be dee shoo doo dee boo dee. So I mean, I grew up hearing that
Oh yeah,
music, but it
oh
was not
yeah.
anything that, and it was never any younger people on the scene. It's always just me in a club with older people and not a lot of people. But
Okay,
I knew
yeah,
they had aspirations, and I heard all of their songs and everything they would play. And
wow,
I like their tunes. I'm not what you would call. I wasn't a diehard fan of it. I mean, I was mainly in the club
yeah,
playing darts, and just enjoying hearing the older people speak nasty, and being the only young kid around in a club at 1 or 12 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So I don't want to give you the impression I was there with a notepad trying to study what they were.
that's
But
okay.
as
But you
time
were
passed, I
exposed
began to.
to it.
Yeah, I was
You were ex
exposed to it. And
Yeah,
when my father would say, "Who want to go to the gig?" Nobody wanted to go, because why would you want to sit up in an empty club with a bunch of 1 or 2 people are drunk? And when you're a kid and you're around adults who are on any type of substances, it's inert. Like you
right,
don't know
right,
what could
right.
happen. But for me, I enjoyed that environment. Like if maybe a fight would kick off or somebody would do something crazy, I always like to come back and tell my brother, "Man, you know what happened tonight?" And so yeah, but they were very serious about music. Now Nat
Yeah,
Paralat was a saxophone player, and he died of a drug overdose in the early 70s, which was really sad. My father loved him. Nat could really play,
wow.
and they were struggling, man, from
Oh
a
yeah,
social standpoint. So I remember the music very well. That's what they played, and they were serious about it. But it was a big struggle finding gigs and playing. And from a social standpoint, they weren't making money and they struggled a lot.
Wow. That's an amazing thing. So, was there ever a recording of any of those tunes that was published and put
Yeah.
out? Okay.
Yeah, it's on
What's it called?
a record label called AFO, and it's called Classic Ellis Marsalis, a record called The Monkey Puzzle.
Okay.
And
All
there's
right,
another book of their tunes called The Silver Book that Harold Batiste published. I wish I had all my information, but the Silver Book has all of their songs, not just my father, Harold Batiste, Alvin Batiste, Clyde Kerr Sr. It was a whole kind of group of them who have musical aspirations that, over time.
Yeah. Well, maybe somebody who's listening now will find that material and redocument it and like get down to the details to publish it so that it can be actually shared and understood. You know, 'cause it sounds like it really just changed the whole way you perceive of music. You know, and
well, James was a genius, Todd. You know, James.
Oh yeah.
My father loved James, and the type of respect my father had for James.
Oh yeah.
Always was from, because James was really wild, and people would kind of try to condescend to James because he was getting high and he was,
right.
He struggled. He started off as a trumpet player, and James could be, a handful to deal with. But man, my father had so much love for James' ability, and James too respected my father. If he was getting into something that he didn't want people to know, he said, "Don't tell Ellis," Don't tell Ellis. And for me as a kid, I always thought, wow, they got an interesting relationship.
Right. Wow. Okay. So here's a question that I think that our musician viewers would really appreciate. So in jazz performance, how much does the concept of musical agreement have to do with creating a dynamic performance? I was talking to a group of kids in Chicago this past weekend. I did a clinic up there. So I was talking to them about specific elements that people need to agree upon this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's like if you take the national motto, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. So if you're not trying to be one, then you're not playing the game.
Right.
So the question is, how can you be yourself and maintain your objectives and your identity and express that identity with maximum passion and feeling?
That's right.
But have the same passion and feeling about other people's objectives, and to be in every moment aware and show acuity, because you're always making choices in jazz, but you don't have the time. You have the time to lie. So you have to be pure of your intention to play with a person, to follow in a section, to play inside of a rhythm section. You don't have time to analyze what people are doing and critique them and determine that you're right. You have to be actually dedicated to projecting yourself, and at the same time listening to them and going from me to we. And you have to assert sometimes, as you know. I mean, me and you, we had such a closeness that when we would be playing, you were young.
Yeah.
Now I don't guess you're that much younger than me, but then it seemed like a lot of years.
That's right.
And we could be warming up and we would play the same 4 or 5 notes. You remember how that was?
I remember that. We would do that all the time.
It's like, and I mean, it's not like all these years I've been playing, I've never had that again with a person.
Oh, yeah.
Where it just was one of those things where we could be connected. It's a spiritual thing. So when we would start to play together, we try to play our horn parts really closely and try to, and all of that is, but when you solo, when you play your music, you're trying to play like yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
So jazz is a key to that type of thing. We struggle with that as a nation right now. That's our biggest struggle.
That's right. I was, so these kids, I was talking to these kids and I said, well, you have to agree on where the quarter note is.
Right.
And I told them, I said, look, the hardest rhythm in all of music is 4 quarter notes. You need to agree about that.
You breaking something down. Right.
You know what I mean? If you don't agree on those 4 quarter notes, it's not going to happen.
That's right. That's right. Like the Constitution. You have to agree that other people should be free.
That's right.
Nobody has a problem with themselves being free.
That's right.
My problem is, should Todd Williams be free? Well, he can be free long as he agrees with me. But once he don't agree with, I don't know about this freedom stuff.
That's right. There you go. That's right. But 4 quarter notes. Let's
Yeah.
agree about that. 4 quarter
Yeah,
notes.
it's difficult to
or-
come to agreement with a succession of 4 quarter notes. I might agree with you. I might agree with the first 8 groups of 4, but once we get
That's
into
right.
that next 8, I'm like,
That's
well, wait a
right.
second. You know, what are you doing? I'm right.
That's right. That's right. Woo! All right. So it's time to get to. All right. Let's talk about suites. You remember we used to go to, or I not used to go to, but we went to Maurice's Snack and Chat out in Hollywood
Oh
on
man.
West Pico Boulevard with Sweets
Yeah.
Edison hanging
yeah.
in the back of his Cadillac.
Oh man, come on, baby. Come
You
on.
talk about baby boy, play the blues.
I don't know how you get that type of sound, baby boy, but you need to get more weight on your sound. I don't think it's the trumpet.
Man, that was an experience. Tell the people about Sweets Edison and like what his contribution was. Like, I mean, it's profound.
Well, Sweets Edison played with Count Basie's great band that left Kansas City in the 30s. And any Frank Sinatra Columbia record you hear in the 1950s, Sweets Edison is on.
Fly
And
Me
he's
to the Moon, yeah.
yeah, Frank wouldn't record for a certain period without Sweets. And Sweets was just the epitome of taste. He could come up with these blues nuggets. He didn't play fast. He played really good, profound blues, and he knew how to play on any type of chord progression. He could find the blues.
That's right.
And
That's right.
I knew him. I met him when I was 13 for the first time in a club called Le Club in New Orleans. And he was like, I'm trying to play. I was always hanging with him. he was very funny. So then by the time I got to be 17 or 18 and left New Orleans, well, I mean, I knew him for years.
Yeah.
And he was really a mentor to me and to a lot of us. He was a unique and original character. And he played through the Depression. So he believed in the communal way. I don't know if you remember the time we were rehearsing in Los Angeles. And Sweets asked me how many people was rehearsing. And he came over with breakfast for all of us, 7 or 9. I don't know, you might not have been
I
there.
may not have been there. No, wow.
Yeah.
That's
well,
amazing.
he would do that kind of stuff. He went over to Maurice's Snack and Chat, which you were talking about. And he showed up at the hotel at 10:30 in the morning, at 10 o'clock, something like that, with 9 or 10 breakfasts that he brought for us. And that's how he was in that generation of musicians who played in the Depression. When they were in their 20s in the 1930s, they were very different from the musicians who were in their 20s in the 1940s.
Right, right. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That was a very rich experience. I just remember that, man. That was that's amazing, you know, that we actually got to interface with that generation.
Oh yeah.
People, you know.
Yeah. I loved him. I went on tour with him and Doc Cheatham. And you know, I mean, me and Sweets were tight, so I would talk to him and call him all the time. Sometimes he'd call me if he thought I was messing something up.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You know, and then it was like him and Clark Terry.
Yeah, Clark Terry too.
Yeah, Clark Terry told me that Sweets had left him a bunch of suits. He said, "I don't know what I'm gonna do with these ugly suits."
Yeah, he dressed out a little bit. You know,
Sweets was clean, man.
That's right, man. He had his hair slicked back.
Yeah, Sweets was clean. And CT, you know, musicians I knew when I was in high school.
Yeah. And
then, you know, just to see them go through life till they passed away. CT through all of his illness and having diabetes and then getting really, really sick. And, you know, it's a travail sometimes. It just, you understand life a certain way when you see people go through that cycle. You become old enough to where you've seen it with not just your family members. And then, of course, if you get old enough and you're fortunate, the same thing happens with your parents and so on and so forth.
Right. So CT, man, he was the most personable person, you know, that a person could meet. Like I remember when I first met him, he came up to me, and I know who he was. I didn't know him personally though, but he came right up to me and said, "Hey, Todd, when's the last time you been home, bro?" And you know, he's talking about St. Louis, living in St. Louis, and I was like, Clark Terry's talking to me. Right. I was amazed, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, they followed y'all. I mean, you know, he could call me and talk about the whole band.
Wow, that's amazing.
He knew he was up on younger musicians, so he was always
that's right.
And he loved your playing and you. So he would say it, man, that boy can play. Where you get him from?
How about that? Well, you never know. All right, I got one for you. All right, so imagine you're stuck on a deserted island, and all you could have is one recording. You have a device that you could play that one recording over and over, but none else. Just your favorite recording that you have to have one. Cannot be another.
Yeah.
What shall it be?
I don't know, probably Duke Ellington, Uptown,
Okay, okay. Yeah.
probably that, or Black, Brown, and
Okay.
Beige. But I need a better sounding. I need a better sounding recording. I don't. I like your music, but I don't
All
like
right,
the sound
all
of
right.
that
Let's
record.
let's talk about Stardust because there's a lot of hype online about which is the best version of Stardust and all that kind of stuff. And when I listened to that recording of Louis Armstrong singing and playing Stardust, oh memory, oh memory. To me that's like that's the best right there, man. And
You
how
know,
he,
yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
you can't get no higher than Pops, right? So even
yeah.
even Hoagie Carmichael said that that's what he wished he would have written.
Oh,
And
wow.
also Hoagie
Sometimes I
threw,
wonder why I spend those lonely nights.
oh baby,
Hey, baby. Yeah, yeah.
melody, memory. But Hoagie also through the guy who wrote Stardust, for those who don't know, was a
Right.
high school kid when Louis Armstrong was playing on the south side of Chicago. And he would go check out Louis Armstrong. And he was tight with Bix Beiderbecke. And Hoagie threw Louis Armstrong's 70th birthday party
Oh, wow.
at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles.
That's
So this is a kind
amazing.
of lifetime of these musicians. And Hoagie, of course, was a great songwriter. But I love Pops, but probably the best solo one is Lionel Hampton's live version.
Yeah.
Woo!
Oh, man.
Man, that's one of the
That's one of the killingest versions.
that
Ba-da-da-ding.
is that's
From
exactly how it
the
started.
very
Oh
first note. Ba-da-da-ding. Uh-oh.
yeah, yeah. Oh, you can hear him too, laughing to himself and co-signing what he's playing. Oh,
That's right.
that's
Oh,
a
yeah.
powerful version.
So you all out there, you hear that? Lionel Hampton's version of Stardust live. You got to check that out. If you've never heard that, it's going to change your musicianship.
Oh yeah, no question.
So, all right. I think, well, maybe we should take some questions from our listening audience. Julia's online and she's going to feed us some questions. Julia,
All
do you
right.
have any questions for
We
us?
have questions. They're coming in all over the place. I want to remind folks on Facebook, if you have questions, just put them in the comments and we'll try to get to those as well. We've got a lot of questions here. We may have to do this kind of a speed round here. First one is from Christopher, and he asks, how do you help your rhythm section groove and keep time without dragging?
Well, some rhythm sections rush and some drag. It depends on who they are.
We got to
In
agree
general,
together.
I mean, it's just you have to just say time. But they have to want to play together. Generally, musicians come together and they all have a different sense of time. So bass players may rush and drummers may drag. Or it could be the opposite way. Your bass player could be dragging, your drummer could be rushing. In general, drummers have the tendency to rush and bass players have the tendency to drag. And if you put a guitar in there, if you have a 4-piece rhythm section, which is uncommon today, but the guitar generally is the integrity of the time when it's a 4-piece rhythm section, right, Todd?
That's totally right. Yeah. They keep
And
that. Yeah. They keep all 4 beats in the pulse, And so since they concentrate on that, there's more of a tendency for the guitars to be right on.
But what we do if the time is not right, if we look at our wrist like we're looking at a watch,
That's right.
and,
Okay.
and everybody's trying to play in time. So it's just a matter of being aware and listening to tapes of it and trying to figure out what if you drag, then you and the drummer knows they rush. Y'all try to find like a medium thing. The swing is about wanting to come together. And when something is swinging, it doesn't mean it's perfectly in time.
That's
it means
right.
that the intention to be in time is perfect.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And
Great.
quite honestly, I know some of those recordings with Train, they would pull back and then they would catch up and pull back. And the time was kind of like this kind of thing. And
Right.
that's even better.
Right. You know, Elvin is playing like a wave.
That's
When you
right.
first would play with him, you wouldn't, the time would just be.
That's right. That's right. But they played together as a unit, like you would not
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah, they loved each other. So that was different. That was a spiritual thing.
Yeah,
Okay, ready for our next question?
go for it.
All right, this one's from Larry. He says, it seems that there is finally an upsurge of interest in jazz today. More young vocalists and instrumentalists are getting recognition. And he wonders if you agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know, you know, just vocalists always have gotten more recognition after a certain point. It's harder to listen to instrumental music. And we have become like a nation that's kind of so pop oriented. There's not even instrumental solos. There's people playing instruments or a lot of stuff that we listen to. And it's a problem of our education and our hearing. I don't know that the younger vocalists are getting that much if they're really singing jazz. Some like Cecile McLaurin Salvant no, but she's a genius. So, you know, you can't be mad at people knowing who is. Or Veronica Swift, there's one or two who are really great. Mm-hmm. But it remains a struggle in our country with instrumental music and jazz. We need to play our horns better, and we need a better education for people who want to hear horns. I think, but I mean, Todd may have another impression.
So yeah, I think that the instrumentalists need to be sensitive to what their audience actually hears. You know, so there's a tendency to, once you get a whole body of knowledge, you want to show everybody you know
right,
all these notes and techniques and all that kind of stuff. But people, by and large, listen to music for the vocal quality. And the more we can portray like that vocal quality, something that sounds lyrical, expressive, it's all about the effect. You know, when you play, you want to create an effect that sounds more similar to language as opposed to just some intellectual kind of stuff. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because the math of music is interesting too. It's unbelievably interesting.
That's right.
But for an audience that's not scientific,
that's right.
And they don't really. They know when it's not. They kind of know when it's not there, when the math is not there. But they really know when the linguistic kind of passionate part is not there, and there's nothing to tie them to it.
That's right. I tell you what, it's kind of interesting. I did a State Department tour to India, and the people were grunting and grunting. And the guy that I was with, he asked the interpreter, said, "What are they doing with all that grunting?" He says, "They're counting the rhythms."
Yeah, you know, they play on really long cycles.
That's right. That's right.
I played with some musicians from Pakistan. They were counting to 96. And
that's right.
84. I was like, no wonder that culture is so good from a mathematics standpoint. They deal with huge cycles.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I mean, but see, that's like in America, that's almost non-existent, you know, in terms of people who are that engaged. Can you imagine going to the Village Vanguard and people counting your solo?
Well, I mean, you know, some of the music they're playing, you'll never count that. 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 6, 7, 9, 30. And the Indian music is a cycle, so you can kind of get to what the cycle is. But when you have cycles that don't have a real organic quality.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if instrumental jazz and vocal jazz is more popular. Technology makes it more accessible for sure, you know. And I mean, I remember when it was difficult to find some recordings, but now even those rare, like we were talking about Lionel Hampton's recording of Stardust, please check that out. You don't have to be a genius to find it. You know, you just log on to YouTube someplace and you'll find it, you know. But so the access is increased, I would say, for sure. I don't know about the popularity, you know.
Sure.
All right,
okay.
Julia.
Ready for the next one?
Sure.
Okay, this one we're going to take from Facebook, and I don't have my glasses on, so I'm going to have to hold my phone up. This one's from Theodore, and he said, "Hello, Wynton." What's that?
I said, you speaking my language, but you got to get your distance right.
Oh, I know. Oh, boy. It says, Theodore says, "Hello, Wynton. Earlier, you talked about playing as one. How do you, as a soloist, put aside your own playing to be able to hear everyone else playing without losing your own train of thought?"
Well, that's how I like to play. So it's like talking. You know, I'm kind of talking and interrupting Todd, but I hear what he's saying. And I could pick up right with what he was talking about. Like he said, go online and you can hear more instrumentalists. I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about instrumentalists right now. He, however, thought about all the instrumentalists who ever played. So that's he was in a different frame of reference from me. So without this question, I wouldn't have said anything about it. But when he said it, I thought to myself, yeah, I wasn't thinking in that mode at all. And that's how jazz is. Every time somebody introduces an idea to you, you're not thinking it. I taught a class for kids this morning, and I asked them, what does the word resilience mean? And one kid said, it means that people can't penetrate your emotion and they can't change your mind. And then somebody said, that's wrong. Well, it wasn't really what I was looking for. So he held his head down. I said, you know, we have a tendency to always make you think it's right or wrong. But actually, what you were saying, the essence of that is actually true, but it's not anything I would ever have thought about. So you actually gave me an education that in order to be resilient, you do have to have a kind of mindset that you're not going to be swayed from an emotional standpoint by every catastrophe that hits you. You're going to be focused. So, you know, in that way, that's how we do in jazz. I was talking about resilience. He introduced another idea that was not mine, but I could take that idea and combine it with what I was doing. And that's what we do with rhythm sections all the time. A drum rhythm, saying if we play two horns together, and it's a skill I've worked on my entire life. And I like to do it.
Yeah. Well, musicians, they think in terms of polyphony, you know, so that you have, you know, many notes moving at one time. And the ideal is to play something that is, you know, maybe the opposite of what somebody else is playing, not to necessarily just imitate what they play. So if I play 1, 2, 3, I don't necessarily want you to play 1, 2, 3, right? That doesn't make for a good conversation. Like I say 1, 2, 3, and you say 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. You know, then there's a musical dialogue. You know, so if you can concentrate on making, in answer to the guy's question, and if you can concentrate on creating a musical dialogue, it'll make the whole band sound better. You know, because you'll end up playing music that complements what the other has to say, and so yeah, that's one of the goals in jazz. You want to do that,
and it's like a conversation, because Todd has said that. Now I could say the opposite of what he said. I could counterstate him. I could say, well, you know, it's polyphony, but you don't play polyphony most of the time. Or I could say, yeah, I agree exactly what he's saying. And furthermore, when you play polyphonically, you get used to hearing a bunch of different voices, and you're able to pick them out and follow them, like if you're in a room with 4 people talking at the same time. Or I could just kind of co-sign him and go, yeah, like he just told me, right. Like you have modes of conversation that you also use when you play. And when you have an integrity about how you play jazz, you don't feel that a counter statement is an attack. Like I could play something one way with fast note, and Todd could say, and I don't think, why is he doing that when I'm going? I think, hey, I could do some of that too. Or I could fit that into. So you're always you're 2, 3, 4, 5 people trying to figure out how to work together.
Right.
I tell you, jazz musicians have to have the most open minds of all musicians, I think, just to go with the flow and to, like you said, to accept what the other musician is doing.
It's very difficult. It's easy. It sounds fun when you're saying it.
That's right. Julia, there was a time when we were on a mission to play short solos.
Well, I will tell you, Todd, one of the questions that just got asked is, in your opinion, both of you, what's the best solo you've ever witnessed?
Well, I can tell you that right away. I remember we were at Wolf Trap in D.C. and I saw Sonny Rollins playing, and I was just blown away. Just, man, this guy, you know, I've never heard a tenor saxophone play like that before, you know, and to hear it live, and I mean, because I had heard the recordings, but then to hear him play it live, I was like, oh my goodness, you know, that for me, that did it for me in terms of live saxophone players. Yeah.
Right. For me, it was Betty Carter. I saw a set of her in Germany. Whew. Every song, she was just, our sound man, Dave Robinson, we were together and we looked at each other and we said, now that's the greatest concert we've ever seen. I mean, she just was, every song, she was just unbelievable. soloing, singing, doing her arrangements. So it was a tour de force.
That's right.
That was 30 years ago, probably.
That's right.
And like Todd said, perhaps some of those are, if we dig deep enough online, we can find those and listen to those.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna find that one. The one I'm talking,
Yeah,
we're not gonna find that one. That Lionel Hampton one, you can definitely find.
yeah.
That's right.
Okay, well, we're going to take a little flip here. And Wynton, I know you have a show tonight. You've got a sound check to get to, but do you have time for maybe 2 more questions?
Sure, yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, this one's a little bit different than what we've been asking. This one's from Eric, and he said, what is your take on those paper bag tests that African-American clubs used to use to prevent people of darker complexion from joining the ranks and participate in their activities, from music to Mardi Gras? And to best of your knowledge, is that still being practiced in New Orleans?
Well, yeah, people like to segregate themselves. What do you think about the redistricting that just took place in Carolina? I mean, segregation is one of the things that people do all over the world. I'm a jazz musician, so I'm not a fan of that, of diminishing people's rights, of putting people down, of lowering them for something that's not real. That's not our ethic, and it's not our ethos. Yes, it goes on. It's not, they're not using paper bags, probably. There's many ways to do it. Fill out a form. I mean, it's always, it's easy to exclude people from, so I'm against that kind of stuff. Maybe Todd might be a supporter of it, though.
No paper bags. No, I mean, that's what can you say? There will always be people who want to destroy. I mean, you either want to destroy or you want to build up.
That's right.
And I want to be on the build up team.
Right.
So it's just we don't have enough time. You remember we used to say that, Wynn? There's no time.
There's no time. There's just not enough time.
Not enough time. We can't be bothered with trying to tear people down.
There's simply not enough time for all of that. Like when you're playing, you can't do that.
That's right.
Because you really don't have time.
That's right. That's right.
For our next question, I'm going to blend 2 questions that are kind of similar. One is from Moja, and she says she's seen you perform many times and loves the experience. She wants to know, how do you make the younger generation interested in jazz music? And then Adrienne on Facebook wants to know, would you ever do an updated version of your Jazz for Young People curriculum and add in more current jazz music? So how do you get younger people interested in jazz? And would you ever consider updating Jazz for Young People?
Younger people need education. I don't view younger people as a market. So I remember when Todd was younger people, and there was never a lot of people who were interested in playing. So there's kind of a thought sometimes like, well, when you were coming up, people wanted to, no, when I was coming up, nobody was interested in jazz. They were interested in funk and pop music. When I first heard him play, he was in high school. Nobody was playing like him. We were all amazed a kid his age could play like that. And it was rare because he actually sounded like a real actual jazz musician. Like he was trying to play the music. And it's not a kind of music that needs to be verified by its popularity. Its quality is what verifies it. And so I think younger people, we need that, but we're losing a lot of our younger people. It's very different now from what it was in the past. Right. Because now our younger people are more and more divorced from older people, even in their family. And they're victims of a marketing scheme that started in the 1950s and has gained momentum, that exploits their sexuality, that exploits their taste, their undeveloped taste, that exploits everything about them. And it's such a pernicious kind of bacteria. And it's an infection that has gone unchecked. Right. And at this point, the younger people have been so exploited and abused, it's hard to even.
That's right.
I'm in such a small number of adults I fought my entire life against this. And it's been a losing battle, to be honest. So I believe in educating young people, and I believe in trying to make them aspire to be adults, not to exploiting their ignorance and their sexuality and using music and all these tools to abuse them. And that's what we've done for 60 or so years. And in terms of the second question, would I update it and use jazz? I would update it, but it will always be jazz. Like I wouldn't update it and put a hip hop beat on it or have somebody calling people the N-word and all stuff that's popular. I'm not ever going to do that. I'm going to go to my grave being against that. And that's the one thing I'm most proud of. And I hope that when some kid is researching me 100 years from now, some university that you've never heard of, and they have to dust off all of this stuff, they say, I found this one obscure figure that no one has ever heard of, and he was against all of this stuff. He was against this ignorance that everybody loved. I hope that I'm known for that.
Yeah. So, also too, one thing that I always I found this to be interesting when we would play concerts is that people would respond with like, wow. It's like that one tune that Wynton wrote. So this is jazz. Like
Right.
they would be like, I like that. That's what it is. It would be like a sense of amazement. Like all this time, I really didn't know what it was. I like that. And it was
Right.
just because it was good. If something is good, people like it. Wynton used to say, "What's not to like about it?" You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
If there was a great performance, and great performances could come from anybody. We could meet somebody on the road as long as they're studying. It's wow.
That's right.
And nobody's excluded. Like we don't have like the jazz rights. You know what I mean? So anybody who's like shedding and putting in the time, they're gonna sound fantastic. And then when people hear that, they're like, wow, I didn't know that an
Right.
instrument could sound like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And so that's where our young people have been duped because, in the media, we're fostering all this other material. And it's like, wow, it's like they can't get a break. They're just
Just
bombarded
laugh.
on every side.
Say,
You flip on your
yeah.
phone, videos start playing. You don't even have to click on
It's
it
sad.
now.
It's sad. Every commercial is a music video.
That's
TV
right.
is a commercial, it's a music video, a bunch of people dancing. And in your phone is feeding you things that you like. So you don't get
Right.
a chance to experience the things that you don't like, which are part of rounding out your experience and your understanding and your political views. You look at one thing. I always like to have my phone feed me stuff that's the opposite of what I think. So it lets me know I'm looking at the right stuff.
That's right. Some ancient philosopher.
So, yeah, they sent me all kind of stuff. For a long time, they couldn't determine whether I was white or black. So they were
Oh,
sending
that's
me
so
like,
funny. That's so funny how they do
right.
that. They try to
Oh,
figure you
yeah.
out.
I'm always trying to fool them.
I love it. I love it.
Well,
Wow.
there are so many more questions, but again, I want to be respectful of your time. We are just so thrilled that you were generous to join us tonight. And both Todd and Wynton, such great jazz musicians and educators. I mean, you are such an inspiration, both of you, for your devotion to working with young students and bringing them up in this tradition of jazz. And as you said, what's not to like? Jazz
Mm.
is so freeing. And I agree. Once the young students hear the real deal, I mean, they're going to be hooked. So again, thank you. And I want to mention to everybody out there that our next Jazz Talk is with the great jazz vocalist, Stacey Kent. And that's on March 3rd at 7 p.m. And it is a prelude to her performance at the Palladium coming up later in March. So we hope you join us for that. It's also a free program. Go ahead and register on our website. And from those of you across the country and around the world, thank you for joining us tonight. And we hope to see you at the center very soon. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.
Okay, thank you. Todd
Thank you, man.
Williams, always love. Deep love. Give my love to your people, always.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Love you too. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, man.
Brother
Bye-bye.
Julia.
Farley!